Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. And we are back here with Dr. Laura Garland, who's our shamanic Reiki master, our healer, our inspirational coach, and so much more. And we want to welcome her to the show today. And Charleston Reiki and Tarot, she actually pulled a card already to talk, and it's going to tell us about what we're supposed to talk about today. Explain this. This is awesome.
Well, Jill, I sometimes when I go to sit down and talk to you, I'm like, I don't know what we're going to talk about today. So I go to my cards and literally I was shuffling them, and I do this for a living. So shuffling cards is not a thing that I have a problem with, but I'm like, what are we going to talk about today? And this card says relationships, literally flew out of the deck across the room onto the floor. And I was like, oh yeah, duh, it's Valentine's Day on Monday.
Clearly meant to be. Yes, exciting.
Yeah, so I was like, okay, well, yeah, you can't get any more clear than that, at least as far as I'm concerned. So and just for people to know, and since I showed that, I need to be very clear. These are Soul Journey cards by James Van Praagh. Have to do that just to make sure. And so relationships, well, they've been stressed recently for a lot of people. We had Mercury retrograde there in January and early February, and I think every single client my husband had at some point, especially during the last week of January, every single one of them got in a fight with their significant other. All of them who had kids had some sort of major blow up, like major. And it didn't matter whether the kids are like 2 and did a terrible twos thing, or whether the kids are in college or past college, all of them all of them. Every single one of my clients during that time frame had some crazy thing happen. And it was also with like friends too. So yep. It wasn't just in the side of the family. It could be with your friends too. So relationships have been stressed. Mm-hmm. The pandemic obviously has not helped, and people have lost relationships due to that. Because we split into 2 camps there, and people really have lost relationships due to that. And we're now technically kind of in 3 camps. The got a vaccine camp has now split into I don't care anymore, and the people who are still worried. So that's now stressing people out about that. And then we have things like weird, like the weather. We've just had 2 massive ice storms drape across the country, just really make a mess of what's going on for people. I think I just checked the weather for my brother who lives up in Massachusetts. And I think Sunday, there's supposed to be like 50 degrees or something like that, which is really quite warm for early mid-February. But then like Tuesday morning or something, I think they're supposed to be 6. So,
oh, wow.
So, and a lot of the countries had this ricochet weather going on, which actually physically stresses the body. So if your body's physically being stressed, that's going to stress your relationships. It really is. And particularly where it's been going that warm and then that chilly, promotes issues inside of our nasal cavities, just literally physical issues. And your mucous membrane dries out and gets kind of weird. And anytime that happens, you can easily pick up colds or other viruses, not just something else. And so that stresses your body out, and it may not even be sick enough for you to really pay attention, but it is an irritant. And we've had so many irritants just piling up one on top of the other that literally at some point there could be the straw on the camel's back.
Yep.
There really could be, you know, and it could just be something your kids said that you know, or the way you hear the tone that somebody said something, or just one more hearing that, oh my God, we have more ice coming, or something like that, depending on where you are. Or
yeah,
apparently Southern California, I saw that it's supposed to be like in the mid upper 80s this weekend for them. And I checked because I'm like,
wow.
I don't think that's really not right. And they're supposed to be in the 60s in February for highs. And so the mid upper 80s, that's going to stress them out.
Yes.
Anybody on the West Coast, because the whole West Coast and Southwest is getting that heat wave. So, you know, the Northeast is going hot to cold, hot to cold. So is most of the South and the Midwest. And the West Coast is getting this massive heat wave. So it doesn't matter where you are in the country, something wacky's going with the weather, which again stresses the body. Because if the weather's not behaving how we think it's supposed to, that puts a stress on us. It really does. And so we have problems with relationships. And I always pull 3 cards when I do this.
Okay.
And the 2 other cards I got were pride and blame. Ooh, yeah. So I'm sitting here going, oh, wow, how does this have to do? Oh, I know how this has to do with relationships. One of the things that really can make issues in relationships is pride in the not good way. Because with that one, that's the one where you'll take an argument to the bitter dregs. Yes. Even though at some point in the argument you realize you are wrong. Yep. You will not admit it, and you will take it to the bitter dregs. And in that process, say stuff that's really not nice. And your body language gets all really tight, or people can get aggressive with it depending on their personality. And so the whole thing just degenerates into really ugly because we took pride in a not good way. And that just, it really hurts, because as soon as you say something, you can't reach out there and go, no, stuff it back in your mouth. It doesn't work. It's still there. Yeah, and you remember. Yeah, saying I'm sorry, yeah, but it's still there. It lingers in the mind for a lot of people. And so pride is one of the things that's really taking relationships apart right now. I've seen it with my clients talking to me about what they've been doing and saying and how they've been acting. I'm like, oh yeah. And they're like, but I said I'm sorry. I'm like, yeah, but that doesn't, you can't take it out of the ether. It's out there, and it's been said. And so pride is one of those things that's really not the greatest when it comes to dealing in relationships. And these cards all have really interesting ways of taking things and kind of turning them a little bit to make you think about it in another way. Like, how can pride be a factor for good as opposed to a factor for messing things up? And so the card says pride. I love myself and I see myself in everyone. And that's a whole other way to look at pride. I love myself, and then I see how it's reflected in everyone else too. And that right there forms a relationship. So by seeing the reflection in other people, you're automatically doing a good relationship trick.
Mhm.
So, and a lot of the times when we pull out pride, it is because we do not love ourselves at that
Mhm.
moment.
Very
We
true.
put up the shield of pride
Mhm.
because we're feeling like maybe we've been attacked, or like we figured out we have done something wrong and we don't want anybody to know that. So we put up the shield of pride, and don't take it down until
Yeah.
after something very not good has happened. But if we flip this around to pride of, I love myself,
Mhm.
and I see how other people love themselves too, and let's all work on our self-esteem and do that way. That's a type of pride that brings people together, as opposed to putting up shields. And so I love the way that they wrote that, and thinking about another way to do pride, in that I love myself, instead of the pride where you're actually, your self-esteem is in a really bad place, and so you're putting up a shield. So I thought that was really, really very, very nice. Then there's blame. Blame often goes hand in hand with pride.
Yeah.
And when we're having difficulties in relationships, blame is often the card we pull right out and lay right out there. And try to assign blame, make other people feel poorly because they might have done something not that well. Now, if pride's involved here, we might have been the one who did something not so great, and then we blame someone else. That's an excellent technique that's used in making a mess of relationships.
Mhm.
So we blame someone else for something we did, just don't look here, look over there, look over there.
Yeah. And then
It's all their fault. And if instead we accepted our own things that we didn't do so well, and stood up and said, yep, I did it. I will attempt with everything I have to not do that again. Yeah, you should never say, I'll never do that again.
Wow.
Because the person you say that to is going to be like, sure, right. Sure, you're not going to do that again. It's much better to tell the truth and say, I will attempt with everything I have to not ever do that again. Because then you're telling the truth. You're going to try to consciously never do that again. If it is some sort of trauma pattern that got put in when you were a kid, until you get that resolved, the likelihood of you doing something similar again is pretty high. So much better to be very, very straightforward and say, I will attempt with everything I have to not do that again. Again, taking responsibility for what's happening, taking responsibility for understanding that you may need to work on some things so you don't do stuff again. There's also accepting responsibility for your own well-being. Here's the thing, no one else can actually make you happy.
I know.
No one else can make you happy. It doesn't happen. It's not real. Happy is an inside job. It's all an inside job. So blaming someone else for your unhappiness is not taking responsibility for your well-being. Yeah, there are outside factors and they're making you feel whatever, because you're allowing that feeling to happen. I know it's not the funnest thing to think about, and to accept that your internal dialogue is all of yours. Your internal dialogue, how you're processing things in your head, is all yours. Is there depression? Is that a real thing? Yes. And if you're depressed, you need to get help with that. You do. But again, your counselor is going to tell you that it's a lot of what's going on inside. Are there a few things where there are brain imbalances, chemistry imbalances? Yeah, that does happen. But is that the majority of depression? No, actually, that's not the cause. That's like a after effect of things that have gone on and gone on. Do people at this time of year have SAD, S-A-D, seasonal affective disorder?
Yep.
Yeah. Yes, that's also a very real thing. It makes people feel really sad. And it's all due to sunlight, the lack thereof. And so there are things that you can do about that. You can go buy those lights or that have the full spectrum. Heck, if you cannot do that, believe it or not, those fluorescent lights that are everywhere, they're not great, but they're better than nothing. So going into like a store or someplace, a big box store or someplace that has those fluorescent lights, and just hanging with those, if you cannot get a hold of one of the full spectrum lights, that will help. If you can get a hold of the full spectrum light and you have SAD, it's recommended actually that you're supposed to turn the thing on in the morning right away and like put it right in your face and stare at it. Because that triggers the proper production of serotonin in the brain, shutting off the evening's melatonin, which makes you all sleepy. So it's supposed to really, really help with that. But again, if you're just letting things linger, then you're not bringing your best self to the relationship. And that's what we want to do. We want to bring our best selves to the relationship. We want other people to bring their best selves. And this isn't necessarily romantic relationships. This can be, yes, it definitely is, but it can be with your kids. It can be with your friends, other family members, coworkers, all of this. So we want to bring our best selves whenever we possibly can, because that just makes a much better relationship. And blaming someone else for your not bringing your best self, it's not their fault that you didn't bring your best self. Now, one of my favorite authors, Don Miguel Ruiz, he has a thin little book out there called The 4 Agreements. Awesome book. One of the 4 agreements is that you're going to always do your best. It's one of the 4 agreements. Always do your best. Here's the thing. Today's best is not the same as tomorrow's best. It just isn't. So if you always bring your best, some days it's just not the same. You might not have slept so well. You might have eaten poorly. Maybe you didn't get enough fluids. Maybe you're hyped on caffeine. I don't know. So you might not be your best, the same best that you were yesterday. And heck, your best at 3 in the afternoon may not be the same as your best at 10 in the morning.
True.
Our body has a biorhythm to it. And so some people really slump at 3 in the afternoon. Some people are great at 3 in the afternoon. Your best depends on how things are going right then. But if you always bring your best to a relationship, if you always bring your best to everything, then there is no blame. There's no blame at all, because you did your best. Like I said, tomorrow's best might not be the same as today's best. It just might not. There's more than a daily biorhythm. There's a and you can look this up, and these are interesting. The what's known as just your standard biorhythms. You can go online. There's apps for your phone or your tablet. You put in your birthday and it comes up with your biorhythms. And there's a physical, emotional, and a intellectual are the three main biorhythms. And it's really weird. I will literally be feeling bad, and I'm like, why am I feeling so bad? Why do I feel cranky? Why do I, what is going on? And I'll finally go and look at my biorhythm, and like either my physical or my emotional is like completely bottomed out. And I'm like, oh, and
Oh, like
oh.
that.
So, and and some days I feel like so just on and everything's clicking. And it's rare that I'll actually check my biorhythm when I'm feeling that. It's usually when I'm feeling poorly. But sometimes I'll think and I'll check it, and like all three will be hitting a high at once. And I'm like, oh, great, no wonder.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And when that's happening, my best is way better than when all three are bottoming out all at once. And so, but there's no blame as long as if all three are bottoming out all at once, and I'm tired and I'm cranky and
Mm-hmm.
I can't pull a thought together. If I tell my husband, honey, my biorhythms are bottoming out today, it's just not clicking, it's not working, should probably just kind of give me the day for myself. Over the years, he's learned to actually listen to me about that.
Smart man.
And just like leave me alone.
Mm-hmm.
Because my best is not the greatest that day.
Mm-hmm.
And literally I've learned that my best is to be left alone when I'm feeling like that. When I was still having my monthly cycle, that there were months when that just didn't go all that well, and I would just be like, honey,
Mm-hmm.
just alone today. And he learned that was a great thing. And I would try to limit my contact with, say, the public, like not go to the grocery store, things like that. When I'm feeling like that, I try to take responsibility for what is happening with myself, so that I don't get into an argument with someone. I don't get into a really deep level of upset of some way, by taking responsibility, knowing what's happening with myself. And part of this goes back to mindfulness. Yeah, we always pull it back to that. So I'm mindful of how I'm feeling and how I'm interacting. Working with this for years, and working really hard with this, and trying all the time to do my best. Do I do my best all the time? No. During Mercury retrograde, I think I shared, my husband and I got in a wicked fight over absolutely nothing. It was over nothing. And because both of us were not being mindful of what we were bringing to that conversation at that time. And we shouldn't have even been having the conversation at the time. It was not the best time of day. It was late at night. And that's another thing for relationships. Don't have really hard conversations right before you go to bed. Don't do it. Don't do it. Because it's going to then make for lack of sleep, which is just going to make the next day worse, which is going to make your next day the best, not the greatest. So don't do it. Also, don't ever go to bed mad. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't go to bed mad at your kids. Don't go to bed mad at your significant others. Don't go to bed mad. It just, your body during sleep is trying to do a lot of repair. And that's when it's supposed to do that. If you go to bed mad, you're producing chemicals throughout your body that are actually impeding that repair. So there is a physiological reason to not go to bed mad. You're not going to repair as well. And again, then you're not going to feel that good the next day. And so your best is not going to be as good as it could be. Also, for couples, right when people walk in home from work, don't start in right then. Don't hit the hard conversation right when someone gets home. Most people need some time to shuck the whole work thing, whatever has gone on. And so even if it was a great day at work, they still need transition time. Yeah. So, and if you're one of those people who has a tough job, where there is stress in your job, find a ritual with your significant other to know about this ritual for you to transition. Some people, it is going outside or going to a window or reading or listening to music, or I'm not going to suggest alcohol because that, as we now know, even one drink actually is killing brain cells. So
yes.
yes. I know that is some people's coping mechanism, but again, you gotta be careful with that, because that won't bring your best after a little bit. But thinking about things, rituals and things, so that you can transition, so that if you do have hard topics to talk about in a relationship, to do that. The same goes with your kids. Don't pounce on them the minute they walk home from school or get off the bus or whatever the heck it is that they do, or you pick them up or whatever. You know, they need transition time too. They need to be able to transition. So think about being mindful of how to bring best, how not to blame, how pride can actually be, I love myself and I see that reflected in others, as opposed to this shield we put up. Think about bringing all of that together in relationships, because we do have Valentine's Day coming up on Monday, and how we can make this the best year ever with all of our relationships, and really move things forward by bringing our best, having pride by loving ourselves, and accepting responsibility for our well-being.
Beautiful.
So
love it on that note. It is Valentine's Day. Yeah. This is a PS I love you week for those elementary schools out there, I know, in the United States. So we got to give love, give thanks, be grateful, and some great tips, because everything is about relationships.
It is.
And just to be kind is my advice. And the gratitude always.
Always.
Oh, thank you, sweetheart. And Dr. Laura Garland, how can we reach you? What is the website?
CharlestonReikiandTarot.com, or you can call me 843-259-8349.
Perfect. Looking forward to the next time we speak. Thank you, and have a great Valentine's Day.
You too.
Thank you for reminding us. All right. We appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you can now listen live on the MyTuner Radio and online Radio Box apps for iOS, Android, and the Amazon App Store. Or check us out online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on onlineradiobox.com/US so you don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.